Check, check, mic check. Check, check, mic check. Welcome to Podcast Envy, episode 85. I'm your podcast boss, Andrea Klunder. And as I mentioned in episode 84, I know it's been a while since I've been here with you on the podcast, like almost a whole month with no episodes. A whole month? A month plus? It's been a while. And for that, I apologize, but I'm not really sorry because the reason why I've been MIA is because I have been hard at work behind the scenes working with some amazing clients and students to produce their shows. I don't know if you've been listening long enough to know this about me, but the way that I make money and what my business is started off by editing podcasts for independent podcasters. And by editing, I basically mean taking the raw audio files, cleaning up the dialogue, tightening things here and there, minimizing the number of verbal disfluencies like so that their listeners could have a smooth, unimpeded listening experience because you may or may not know this, but at the Creative Imposter Studios and on Podcast Envy, we are all about the experience of podcasting. And that goes for the podcaster, the listener, the guests, the sponsors, the collaborative partners, whoever is involved in the ecosystem of that podcast is a stakeholder and deserves to have an incredible experience. And so that's what we help to facilitate. And like I said, in the beginning, I was just simply editing, making things sound clean, helping boost the audio quality, and helping those podcasters to manage their shows inside their hosting company, which brings me to our podcast angel of the episode, and that is my favorite podcast hosting company, Libsyn. One of the many things they have been working on is updating and improving their user experience for the podcasters who host on their platform, and also making sure that we were among the first to be able to submit our shows to a brand new destination, which is native to Samsung Android phones. That is really specific and really technical, but what you need to know about Libsyn is that they're great, and I use them with nearly all of my podcasting clients. So if you are getting ready to launch your podcast and you haven't picked your host yet, or you already know you're going to go with Libsyn, but you'd like to have your first month of hosting services for free, you can use the promo code ENVY when you sign up for your Libsyn hosting account and get that first month free. Again, the promo code is ENVY, and you can learn more about Libsyn linked in the show notes at thecreativeimpostor.com/PodEnvy085, which is linked conveniently in the description in your listening app. I also want to take a moment right here to tell you about something new that I'm cooking up and is part of why I've been MIA, and that is the brand new Craft and Culture Club being hosted on Mighty Networks. Podcast Envy Craft and Culture is a place for you to get all of my bossiest podcasting advice. So even if I go MIA from the public podcast feed here for a month, it could happen. You'll still have direct access to me to be asking questions, having conversations, seeing what other podcasters who care about the craft and culture of their show are doing. And this just in, one of the services that I provide for my regular monthly retainer clients is a periodic newsletter in which I let them know about industry insider information, new opportunities with their show, tips, guidelines, etc. Like, did you know that Apple Podcasts is dropping the word subscribe from their app? Yep. All of you who are saying subscribe to my show, subscribe in Apple Podcasts, God forbid if you're still saying subscribe in iTunes because they haven't been using the word iTunes for ages now. If you were one of my clients, you would know this already from the newsletters that I've been sending saying that you need to change up your marketing language in your verbal, intros and outros and calls to action, and in your website and socials, etc., to either say listen or follow. Okay, this is not part of the Podcast Angel segment, but this is an example of those insider tips that now, even if you're not one of my retainer clients, you will be able to find those things out inside the Craft and Culture Club via Mighty Networks. So how do you join? Go to thecreativeimpostor.com/craft and culture, add your email there, and you will be on the wait list to find out when the club will be available. Okay, now back to our actual episode. So, where have I been the month of March 2021? I mentioned during the Podcast Angel segment what I've been cooking up for you behind the scenes. And I started to tell you how my business was basically built off of editing podcasts for indie podcasters. And somehow, over the past 6-ish plus years that I have been part of the podcasting industry, I have leaned more into opportunities to consult on strategy with small businesses and nonprofit organizations and indie podcasters, and to take on a role of a producer or a producing editor in which I get to help develop the show's concept from its inception, see it through the launch process, and continue to provide creative input, strategy, and support behind the actual day-to-day creation of that particular show. So the work has gotten more creative, more interesting, and more expansive. Client budgets have gotten a little bigger. I'm able to do more. And the end of 2020 saw organizations who really wanted to find a new way to connect with their audiences and build up their brand culture in 2021. And podcasting is a great way to do that. So I had a lot of inquiries right at the end of the year. I said yes to most of them. And now I have a very full plate producing content for other shows that are not my own. I'm not telling you all of this just to brag about how amazing my business is right now. I am telling you this because we were in the midst of a series on self-care and podcasting, or self-care for podcasters. And one thing that I have come to realize in my business is that self-care equals community care. And also, self-care has a lot to do with the people who are around you and the relationships that you are in. So it is a little bit of a misnomer to think that self-care is really just about yourself. If you are in good, strong, healthy, supportive, growth-minded relationships, yourself is going to be more well cared for. And if you are in relationships that are one-sided, that drain your energy, that bring you down, then you are not going to be so well cared for in yourself, or you're going to have to find other ways of coping. And this directly applies to you as a podcaster who are bringing other people into your ecosystem, whether that be you hiring other service providers, maybe an editor, maybe a show notes writer, maybe a podcast manager, maybe an intern, maybe an associate producer, or even if you are a one-person DIY operation, if you are bringing guests onto your show. Or even in the relationship that you have with your listeners and with your audience, or with your clients, if your clients are part of your listenership. And on the flip side, right now, what I'm experiencing is if you are a service provider of some sort, whether that be in the podcasting industry or somewhere else, that relationship that you have with those clients, the people and companies and organizations who you choose to partner with as a service provider, man, people who are employed complain about their bosses or have great relationships with their bosses. When you are a self-employed individual, you are your own boss, but your clients sort of become those de facto bosses, and then you have a whole bunch of them. So the relationships that you have with those bosses matters a lot in terms of your overall health, happiness, and well-being. When you are thinking of the service providers that you hire to help you with your show, how do you think of them? Do you think of them as just somebody that you are contracting to deliver a thing? Do you have an editor relationship, or do you want an editor relationship where you send them files via email or Dropbox or Google Drive or something like that? They clean up the files and then they send them back to you, and you have very little actual human one-to-one interaction, conversations, etc. They have little input into your show or your process. Or do you want to work with somebody who is a strategic partner with you on your show? I had one brand new client at the beginning of the year who said something to me when we were talking about possibly working together. And she said that she was also reaching out to another service provider. And she asked herself, Will that other service provider care as much about my show as Andrea does? And the answer for her was no. Andrea is clearly invested in my show and cares about its success. I'm going to tell you a little secret. Now that I have a roster of clients who I really feel connected to and I feel aligned with the work that they are doing and the messaging that they're putting out there, this is not to say, side note, that all of my clients are the same or doing the same type of show or the same type of work, or are even in a field that I would have thought twice about or cared anything about prior to working with them. But this is to say that whatever field or mission that they have, the common denominator of all of my clients right now is that they are forward thinking and progressive in improving the lives of the people within their niche or their industry. So that was a sidebar. But back to thinking about how much I care about these clients' shows, my little secret is that I sometimes even think of the shows, not the clients themselves, but the shows as like my children. I want them. I'm like co-parenting these shows. And some shows I'm more involved in and some shows I'm less involved in. But it feels like I'm co-parenting these shows and bringing them into the world when they're new and trying to give them every opportunity possible to grow and to thrive and to reach their full potential while still maintaining that balance of not being overbearing and smothering them. So that's a little weird insight into my brain. But the point is that you can consider what type of relationship you are looking for when you are hiring people to help you with your show. Are you looking for a straight service provider who is going to be very task-oriented, cut dry? Oftentimes, that service provider may have a lower price point attached to their services or a more templated way of working. Or do you want somebody who's more invested, more involved, more of a strategic partner in the growth and development of your show? Neither choice is right or wrong. I have learned about myself that I strongly prefer the second, both in the types of service providers that I work with in my business and also in the types of clients that I work with and what they're looking for on their shows. It is no longer as satisfying to just chop up an episode for somebody, smooth it out, and send it back over, as it is to really think about and find strategies for those shows' overall success that may be above and beyond just making sure that it sounds good. The moral of this story is that I would love for you, as an act of self-care for your show, to think about the relationships that you have around your show and in your ecosystem, whether you be bringing on service providers to help you or whether you be providing services out to your clients. Think about those relationships, think about those ecosystems, and figure out what are the relationships that you have or that you're looking for that when you are in partnership together, in relationship together, the work that you are creating becomes better and better. Now, the specific experience that I've been having this month that really inspired the entire conversation here today is working with a new client who is launching a show this spring. And I don't want to spill the tea too much on this particular project, but the host of the show did already leak it on LinkedIn. And so I'll let you know that it is a new podcast coming from Del Norte Credit Union based out of New Mexico called Financial Tea in the Morning. And you may be thinking, Andrea, how on earth could you get excited about a podcast about credit unions? It's actually super interesting. We actually planned this show in a season by season format. So there will be 6 episodes in season 1 and then a break and 6 episodes in season 2, etc. Each season is structured around a theme. And then each episode within that season touches on a different aspect of that theme. And because the host and producer of that show, whose name is Diego, because Diego trusted me and trusted the process, this is not going to be your cut and dry personal finance show, nor is it going to be your cut and dry credit union show, which you might not think that's the genre, but it is. We took a survey of everything that was out there that we could find in this space and really spent some time developing the concept of what could we do that is different? What can we add to the conversation that isn't already out there? And how can we do it in a way that feels slick and fresh and engaging for our listeners. And Diego was willing to go there. And because he was willing to go there, because I was in partnership holding that creative space and he was trusting the process, we were able to bring guests on for the show, which we've already recorded all of our interview content. And now we're in the editing and voiceover scripting stage, which is not a process that every podcast goes through, but this podcast is. But we were able to bring on some really amazing guests, some of whom were people that Diego already knew, and some of whom were recommended to him who he reached out to cold. And I think because we're in this partnership, we have this dynamic, we have this trust relationship happening, we were able to bring on guests who really matched that for us, who matched that energy, and create an incredible podcasting experience for Diego as the host, me as the producer and editor, Cabby as our recording audio engineer, and the guests who we brought on. And those guests of that show, we were able to build a relationship whereby some of those guests are now reaching out to me to talk about podcasting or connecting on social media or whatever it is. They're excited about the show. And we've created this whole energetic space around the show. And that scenario, that dynamic is a perfect case study example of when craft and culture come together into a dynamic show experience. And that is the whole point of the work that I'm doing with Podcast Envy and inside the Creative Imposter Studios. I'm sharing this with you not because you necessarily are going to become a podcast producer for other companies and organizations. Maybe you are, but because I want you to think about what is possible when you truly stop to consider the overall experience of creating your show, not just the way in which listeners consume your show, but what is the whole experience, start to finish. You get to be the architect of that. You are holding space for all of those people who touch in on that show ecosystem, and you have the potential to create something truly wonderful and profound. If you want more ideas and examples around how to do this in your show, the best thing to do is to get on that waitlist for the Podcast Envy Craft and Culture Club via Mighty Networks, linked in the show notes, of course, for this episode. I can't wait to connect with you over on Mighty Networks, and I can't wait to share Financial Tea in the Morning with you as soon as it's live later this spring. Podcast Envy is produced by your podcast boss, Andrea Klunder. That's me. The Podcast Envy theme music is by Valentin Sosnitsky, courtesy of the Free Sound Project at freesound.org, and our podcast Angel music is by Benjamin Mastropolito, also on freesound.org as Lemon Cream. All music is licensed under the Creative Commons. Our episodes are mixed by Edwin Ruiz, and hey, if you want your show to sound as good as ours, hire us. Put the magic audio mojo of the Creative Imposter Studios to work for you. Thanks so much for listening, and here's to making your podcast the envy of everyone else.